Pretty nifty of Mick and Keith to think of this. The blue dot means stereo copy, the red dot means mono. Let's see what we got here. There we go. We got a red copy. We got a mono copy of Let It Bleed by the Rolling Stones, which is the next one up in my ongoing reviews of the band's albums in order of release. Says mono all over it, so there's no mistaking it. And Let It Bleed, yeah. Quite a transitional album in a lot of ways. This is their last album of the 60s, so you're leaving the 60s, going into the 70s, and this is their last album with any participation by Brian Jones, unfortunately. This album came out on December 5th of 1969. Brian Jones was kicked out, exited, whatever the story is. He was out of the band. Earlier that year, he actually passed away on July 3rd of that same year, so this came out a few months after he was gone. But he does play on a couple of songs on here, and his replacement Mick Taylor only plays on a couple of songs on this too. Most of this was pretty much put together with Keith taking the bulwark of the guitar duties, and Mick Taylor came in and overdubbed on a couple of songs, and Brian was left over from a couple of songs. These sessions for this album actually started on at least one or two of the songs before Beggar's Banquet, the previous album that came out in 1968, before that was even released, and picked up again in earnest in the early part of the year, January or February of 1969, and they were hoping to release this mid-year, but it didn't work out that way, so it ended up coming out at the end of the year, which is kind of odd because they did their infamous 1969 tour, and this album actually came out after that tour ended, so you had the odd situation of the band playing songs from an album that wasn't out yet. This album is well documented in this book, which I had shown, I think, when I first started this series, one of the best books on the Stones, which this takes you up through about 1969 or 70. Also another great, well, I'll say interesting, because it's up in the air as how factual it all is, but Up and Down with the Rolling Stones, which is a fun read, which I have here somewhere and I can't find, and I was unable to find it to show that. But this is a really good book. Probably the best book on the Stones out there. Up and Down with the Rolling Stones is a fun read. I'll just leave it at that. So, like I said, December 1969, this comes out. Got to number 1 in England. Only got to number 3 in America, which is kind of interesting. But I know in England it knocked Abbey Road off the top of the charts for a week or two. I think Abbey Road bounced back up to number 1. Probably in America it was unable to do that, so it only got to number 3, which, this being one of their prime, their most famous, their most infamous albums, is kind of a surprise looking back on it, but it only got to number 3. Now on July 4th, the day after Brian Jones died, the single Honky Tonk Woman came out, one of their famous great songs. That got to number 1 in England and America and pretty much all over the world. But that is there's a version of it on this album, but Honky Tonk Woman, the single, is not on this album. We'll get to that in a bit here. This is the second album of the famous run of the Great Four, or whatever you want to call it. And it's part of the Jimmy Miller produced album run. But the Big Four started with Beggars and runs through Exile on Main Street, and includes this in the middle, as well as Sticky Fingers, and we'll get to Sticky Fingers and Exile all in good time. But this album, in this book, is called, a couple of the songs are called As Terminal as the 60s Ever Got, and it is an album full of chaos, confusion, death, fear, impending doom, but in a good way. It's a great album, and it's one of their best. It could, someone was to call this their best album, I wouldn't argue too much. I would probably place this at maybe their third best album personally, third or fourth best, but it is a great one all the way through. It's full of rock and roll, of course, good, heavy, hard Rolling Stones rock and roll. It's about this time that they started calling, I think I said that last time on Beggar's Bank, but really around this time in the '69 tour that the epithet of greatest rock and roll band in the world started being bandied about. Guess they knew that the Beatles were sort of on the way out, and Mick felt comfortable with that at this point. And it's kind of hard to argue. This is the one time I would say that a Rolling Stone album equals, and in a lot of cases surpasses, a Beatles album from the same year. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But you've got rock and roll, you've got country on here, blues, Americana, roots music. I don't think they really called it Americana back then, but that's what it is. You've got gospel, and just damn good music pretty much from beginning to end. There's a couple of low points maybe, but really only a couple. It's a solid album pretty much back to front. And so yeah, got the cover there with the cake, the bicycle tire, pizza, clock face, canister of film, and the plate, the record. I really think they should have made that the label, even though it wasn't. And then on the back, it all kind of busted to hell and gone to pot there. But so yeah, I don't think, even though the band did some great stuff after this, my favorite period is the '60s Rolling Stones, the Brian Jones era. And as big of a pain in the ass as he could have been, and I'm sure he was toward the end there, he really was in many ways the heart and soul of the band, and something was really missing after he was gone that they never recovered, even though they did go on to still do great music. I don't think they ever did as great a music as they did from here and going back, as great a music forward as they did from this and the previous albums, but I do think they did some great music. But Brian Jones's influence and his accents of all the exotic instruments and stuff, and when he took time to actually pick up the guitar and play, and the harmonica, is sorely missed from this point out. But great album and great band even after. It's just something was definitely missing. And so yeah, this sort of sums up the end of the '60s with all the Vietnam and civil rights and protest and confusion and violence and disarray and dissolution of the countercultural dream. And let's get into the songs. Gimme Shelter. This is one of the two. The other one is You Can't Always Get What You Want, that the Rolling Stone Guide called as terminal as the '60s ever got. And I would have to agree. This is a great song, Gimme Shelter. It's probably my third or fourth favorite Rolling Stones song. It's just a claustrophobic, apocalyptic view of the protest in the Vietnam and the everything that was going on in there, the ugliness of it all. But it's also a very beautiful song. I love the opening. It's very textured, very layered. It's a slow build up as the different instruments come in that sort of adds to the creeping sense of dread and menace that the song imparts. I love the and I looked it up, it's something called the gyro, if that's how you pronounce it, but that scratchety, ratchety, scrunchy at the sound at the beginning of the song. I always loved that. When I was a few years ago, I did a VC contest of your favorite snippets of songs. That's just sort of a few bits of songs that last 1 to 5 or so seconds that you just always get you in your sweet spot every time. That beginning, that ratchety, crunchety sound always was definitely one of them. Always got me there. Um, it's that pandemonium, that chaos, that falling off the ledge is always just a shot away, but infused with a little hope that good things are always just a kiss away. So it's a little bit of yin and yang, but it does sort of lean more towards the dark side and the menace and the chaos of life in general. You've got Nicky Hopkins on piano, and he's on quite a few tracks in here. Anytime Nicky Hopkins shows up, that's always a treat. He's one of the great unsung heroes of 60s and 70s rock with his piano, and he showed up on Rolling Stones, showed up on Beatles and The Who, and just tons of other. Anytime you got him there, that's always a good thing. And you've got, of course, Mick singing with the great Mary Clayton. I think the late great, I think she's passed away now. I'm not 100% positive on that. But just a great soulful singer that just takes this song that's already wonderful and great and just takes it to the stratosphere with her just sonic rocket ship vocals. It's great. And it works perfectly because obviously Mary Clayton is 100 times the vocalist that Mick is, even though I like Mick's singing. But Mick's singing and hers just blend together perfectly, from her soaring vocals to his sort of Mick Jagger vocals. Works perfectly. Just a great opener. One of their best songs ever. Gimme Shelter gets a 10 in my book. Now we go to the one cover on the album, which is Love in Vain, which is an old Robert Johnson song from 1939. Robert actually recorded that song in Dallas in 1937. It was released in 1939, which I think was the same year that he passed away. The Stones do a really good version on it. They don't match Robert Johnson, but they come really close. They do it a little more country blues than Robert Johnson's, which is sort of a stark, very despairing song about unrequited love and the girl that he loves going away and leaving him. But they do it really well. A little more country blues, like I said. This, I think, is arguably, and the Stones did some great blues covers in their early days, and then they did some more mature bluesy sounding, some covers, some originals, starting with Beggar's Banquet, and on this album too, the psychedelia and Baroque English music hall of Between the Buttons and Satanic Majesty's Request is completely gone by this point. This, I think, is the Stones' best cover, arguably, possibly. There's some good ones on those early albums, though, so maybe you can make arguments for some other ones, but I think this is the closest they ever got to true blues, which is saying something, and because they had done some great blues covers earlier on. But Love in Vain, a great cover of the great Robert Johnson. That one gets a 10 as well, and this album is off to a pretty good flying start. But now we come to not Honky Tonk Woman, but Country Honk, which is a countrified version of Honky Tonk Woman. It's actually how the song started out, was the country version. The Country Honk version was the early version that sort of got Mick Taylor came into the band and added the licks and took it in a different direction, a more blues rock direction. The single's a 10. It's a great song. The country version is harks back to the old time country stuff of Jimmie Rodgers singing Brakeman, Hank Williams, the old 30s, 40s, 50s sounding country. It's not bad, but it's not great. Not the greatness of Honky Tonk Woman. It's pretty good. Brian Jones apparently was around when they first started, would have been the Country Honk version, not the what became Honky Tonk Woman, the single. He may or may not have played on the early takes and demos of the song, but he's not on the version here of Country Honk, and of course he's not on Honky Tonk Woman at all. Country Honk, when I'm playing the album, I don't mind it so much. It's not a song that I search out on its own ever, but it does sort of have that Jimmie Rodgers feel to it. it's not bad. I give it a 7. So there we go. Things pick up again, and this is fourth song, "Live With Me." The first song that Taylor played on the Honky Tonk Woman single that had come out several months earlier, but this is apparently the first song that he actually played with the band on "Live With Me." He adds some great guitar. You've also got Nicky Hopkins again, and you've got Leon Russell, Nicky Hopkins and Leon Russell on keyboards, piano, and Keith plays the bass. It's got a great bass on here. I don't know, Bill Wyman was in the bathroom or something, but Keith picks up bass duties. "Live With Me" is between the sheets, just a nice, dirty, filthy rocker that the Stones do best, and that one gets a 10. So a great rocker by the Stones. Now we finish side 1. It's funny because there aren't that many songs on this album, but they're all great, so that's good. But side 1 finishes with the title track, Let It Bleed. Almost did a Beatles thing there, but Let It Bleed. Another great song. I always love that weird sound that starts it off. It's sort of like there was a violin bow propped up against a speaker cabinet, and someone backed up and bumped into it, and it fell, and on the way to falling, it brushed against the strings of a cello or a violin that was propped up against there, and just got that weird kind of dreadful but yet beautiful sound that opens that song. Another one of those great snippets of rock and roll that I love. Dreadful but beautiful. A lot of drugs and sex and innuendo in this song. Mick singing halfway serious, halfway hamming it up. It works beautifully in this instance. Ian Stewart does some great piano work on this song. It's a song with all the innuendo aside, but it comes down to we all desperately need someone to share our lives with, someone to lean on. So it's a hopeful song in one way, but on the other side, there's a little bit of the menace of, if you trust someone, they're going to let you down feeling to it. But it's a wonderful, beautiful song. Probably my third favorite song on the album. The first one would be the opener, "Gimme Shelter." Second one we'll get to in a bit. But I love "Let It Bleed," and it gets a 10. And I remember Keith being asked in, I think it was a 1971-72 Rolling Stone interview, if "Let It Bleed" had anything to do with "Let It Be." He said it doesn't. Who knows? Both great songs, different songs, but great in their own right. Whether they're related at all, because the Stones did tend to copy the Beatles a lot, but doesn't really matter in the end. "Let It Bleed," it's a 10. It's a great song. We flip the record over and go to side 2, because there ain't no side 3. We get "Midnight Rambler." Brian Jones, this is he played on the conga. He played congas on this, so which is kind of buried in the mix, but he's there. So you've got a song about the Boston Strangler. You've got Mick, who would soon become kind of a cartoon caricature of himself, but here he's still pretty menacing and threatening, and singing about the Boston Strangler. Damn thing froze again, so you're gonna have to look at me looking stupid at the album there till it unfreezes. Anyway, this came out around the time of the Manson murders. Whether the band was aware of this, the recording of this probably commenced before all that happened. But you look back on that and kind of hard not to think of that. There's some pretty nasty lyrics in here. "Stick my knife right down your throat, baby, and it hurts." Kind of a vicious song, but a good rollicking bluesy rocker too at the same time. Unsavory subject matter, but a great song in its own right, and that one gets a 10. I didn't used to like that song as much, but it's grown on me over the years. I thought it was kind of boring when I first got this album. I probably was 14 or 15 or so, but it's grown on me over the years. We go to the second song on the side 2, which is "You Got the Silver." This is notable because it's Keith Richards' first lead vocal. He had done some lead vocal work on "Salt of the Earth" and "Something Happened to Me Yesterday," but then Mick would come in and they sort of would share. vocal duties on that song. This is his first soul solo vocal. It's a pretty good one. It's he would do. I always love a Keith song on the albums from here on out. For the most part, when the Keith songs show up, that's always a highlight, or most always a highlight. This one, it's not a bad song. It's kind of a country-ish thing. I guess he's singing about Anita Pallenberg, both love and sort of worrying about her intention type thing. Brian Jones is on this one too. The second and last song on this album that he plays on, he plays the auto harp. It's Keith would do better, but this isn't a bad song. I'll give You Got the Silver an 8.5. Then we go to Monkey Man, another just gritty down home rock and roll song, courtesy of Mick and Keith and company. I love the way it starts. That sort of sounds like a piano being played underwater. Then you get into the driving, propulsive guitar work. You get some classic Jagger screaming and antics at the end of the song. Just your trademark crazy Mick Jagger stuff, which is always good. And I often wonder how often, because you know what happens, Keith or Charlie look over at Mick and just shake their head and say, you know, what the hell's wrong with that man? But he writes good songs and he keeps things interesting, you know. So Monkey Man gets a 9.5 from me. Then we close with my second favorite song on the album, and maybe the best song on the album, really, though. Just a epic ending that has been compared to the Rolling Stones trying to do a take of a ripoff of Hey Jude. I see it more as kind of a day in the life type song, because it just covers that same sort of looking at the big picture questions of life. This could be seen as sort of, you can't always get what you want, as acceptance of that you can't have everything your way, as acceptance of your mortality. It can be seen as sort of a tip of the hat to the end of the 60s dream, especially after Altamont, even though this was recorded before Altamont happened. But the whole countercultural hopes and dreams that sort of crashed and burned. I love this song. I love the choir. You've got the London choir. You've got another one of those great little snippets that in the introduction, because everything comes in and the song kind of builds and builds, and you've got that great French horn bit from Al Kooper that gives the song a really hopeful and pastoral beginning before it goes off into sort of a darkness, but darkness tempered with hope. And that's what they sort of give you a little hope at the end of the album with this beautiful song. You've got some crazy great drumming on this album, which I always credited to Charlie Watts, but it turns out that it's not Charlie Watts who plays the drums on it. It's Jimmy Miller on this particular song. And so there you go. I would give this album a 10, and I would say, like I said, Beggar's Banquet, I rated a 10. It's a great album. I wouldn't rate it above the White Album. And every year before that, you've got a great Rolling Stones album and a great Beatles album, and I would always rate the Beatles album a little ahead. This one, I would rate right there, and like I said, in some cases, superior to Abbey Road. I would give Abbey Road a little bit of the edge based on the medley, but you take the medley out and you just go song for song, and I think this matches Abbey Road in a lot of cases, is a lot better. I mean, it's a lot better than Maxwell Silverhammer and Octopus's Garden and some of the other kind of filler songs on Abbey Road. Even well, some of the other ones, but Oh Darling. But yeah, I would say kind of academic anyway, because Arthur is my pick for the best album in 1969 anyway. But this is a definite 10 and one of their strongest. This is arguably the band at their creative height. The next two albums are really good too, kind of a spoiler alert. but I don't think as good as they are, I don't think they quite match this or Beggar's Banquet, even though they're way up there too. And we'll get to that. Sticky Fingers will be the next one. So yeah, Let It Bleed is essential. If you don't have this one, go out, watch this video first, and then go get in your car and drive to the record shop and buy it. I always kind of wondered if that was supposed to be Brian Jones among the members of the band on the cake, since that might have been designed before he was out of the band, and well, he's probably out of the band by then, but before he passed away. But who knows? That cake looks like it probably tasted pretty good. Wonder if the band ate it up after the picture. So great album, Let It Bleed. Rolling Stones probably at their height here, and check this out. Worth reading if you want to learn some more about the Rolling Stones. Check that out too. It's kind of fun. Yep. See you all.